podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Greetings, everybody. So Ange is gone again, mate, and we're here again, mates, to look at how the FPL landscape unspools in front of us as the first game week post-international break returns. Just 3 weeks to go to the next one, folks. Joined as always by Sam. How are you, mate? Doing well?
Yeah, good weekend. Very enjoyable. Lots of football going on in the background as well. So I'm slightly distracted by Southampton once again. But we've got lots to discuss today. Obviously, one of us was on a wild card, so we need to have a quick chat about that and plenty of other things to discuss as well. So looking forward to it. We are, as always, who got the assist. On today's agenda, we'll have a quick look back at game week 8 to begin with, see how we got on. Obviously, look at my wild card performance thus far. Ange out and Dyche in. Obviously, things are probably going to change because of that. So we'll have a quick look at that and how that might impact Nottingham Forest as assets, but also probably how we look at them as a team to be targeting as well. And then the core theme of today's podcast will be about the midfield and has it disappointed thus far in FPL. Few noticing the gap between Semenyo and literally every other midfielder at the moment. So we'll be asking if there really is a bit of a drop off after Semenyo and doing a semi-deep dive into all of the data behind whether or not midfielders are just a little bit weaker than they have been in previous seasons. Form versus fixtures will make a return, looking more towards the forwards and the defenders after we've obviously had a deeper look at the midfielders before that. And then 1 week punts, captaincy, and finally our teams as well. It's Tuesday, the 21st of October. Lots of European action going on in the background, and the mighty Saints as well, currently drawing against Bristol. So I've got one eye on that. But in the meantime, more important FPL matters to attend to. How did we get on in game week 8, Tom?
Yeah, let's get into it. And yeah, your wildcard week. I know that there was a mixed fortune, shall we say, around, but yeah, we got a respectable green arrow on wildcard. That's kind of the minimum thing that you want, and yeah, team looking very well set, really.
Yeah, I'm really happy with the wild card. 72 points for me and up to just outside top million. So I think I'm about 1 point outside, maybe 2. So hovering around there, hoping to press on from this point and get inside the top 1 million and 6 figures from now on. But obviously, a lot will depend on the next few game weeks. I ended up with a wild card of Pope in goal, who disappointed against Brighton, but XG looked good, or XGC rather looked good, so not losing faith there. Double Arsenal defence came in clutch, 18 points between Gabriel and Timber. Rodon, little bit disappointing, but again, the underlying data suggested a little bit unfortunate to have conceded against Burnley, let alone twice. 0.45 XGC in that one. Longstaff came off my bench for the injured Enzo. I was convinced Enzo was an international break injury. It doesn't look serious, but it was enough to keep him out of game week 8. I'm still actually very glad that I bought him on a wild card, and honestly, even if I knew that he was out for 1 game week, I probably would have gone with him anyway. So not much changes there. Semenyo, Sarr, and Saka rounding off the midfield. Saka getting, I think, the first ever 7-point haul from a midfielder without getting an attacking return, which is pretty cool. And Semenyo, the ghost assist. I'm not sure whether we'll have time to go into that. I think people have already done that to death. And honestly, it's a little bit boring. And then up front, Haaland doing what Haaland does, and Woltemade looking like a pretty decent pickup on wildcard. Most impressively, I think the fact that he got 90 minutes, I think that was the part I was most concerned about. Very little doubts over the player quality, but I was a little bit more worried about him getting brought off early. But 90 minutes and a very well taken finish against Brighton. So overall, happy with 72. Left points on the bench in the form of Dubravka, but I wanted to try and haul chase with Pope. I felt like there was higher upside there. Possibly a mistake, but I'd probably do it again, to be honest. So yeah, onwards and upwards.
Yeah, you can't castigate yourself too much for that. I think that's absolutely fine. Looks very, very good to me. I did the same thing with Rodon, and yeah, I mean, overall, I think you're very well set up for the weeks ahead, as you should be after having wildcarded. For me,
Yeah.
66, one off the glorious 6-7, which seems that everybody in Gen Z is doing at the moment. Pretty metal round, pretty much the same returns as everyone. Gabriel, Arsenal set piece goals, Sam, twice as many other teams since 2023-24. Absolutely insane. And the second defensive asset in Raya, keeping the cleanie. Haaland and Semenyo with one assist. Yes, one. That's all we can say on that one. Basically, it was all it was. But Bruno's 6-point assist for Maguire in the United game. The big differential to come through, which saw me 3 points above the safety score, at my awful rank of 2.8 million now. It's 3 green arrows in a row, Sam, since wildcards. A big success, up from 3.3 million to 2.7 million. Really tough season, really tough going, and this is just yet to take off, I guess. I did realize something on the train home yesterday, though, Sam. I think I've maybe changed my mentality a little bit from the old days. I've many times cited the whole, FPL Raptor adage that would you feel more annoyed if you didn't do something than if you did? And I was always kind of on the side of, I feel annoyed if I didn't do anything. But I think actually what I realized, my sort of epiphany when I was bored looking out the train when we got to Mossingham or something, at the rain cascading down, was that given the endless parades of 50-50s haven't gone my way, most of them allegedly put myself in that position, it must be said. I think that may have changed me a little bit, actually. And I find more serenity now in just not doing anything because the potential for self-flagellation is that bit less. So I'm probably going to roll again, same as I assume you are. If I'd mentioned in the chat, there's probably is a week to not do very much. Keep those expectations low. And then, I don't know, inevitably raise 3 free transfers in game week 10 when I sell players that return for non-returners. So, yeah, it's been very slow to start the season, that's for sure. And I've never really known anything like it. But no, we've done the action thing. So, yeah, I think this week it does feel just to spoil the end when we go to our teams a good week to just not do very much. Content myself with figuring out whether I play Reinders, who's been on the bench, who's been benched tonight, or Rodon this week. But yeah, there we go. Plodding along very nicely. Yeah,
On to Dyche.
Yeah,
Another new manager.
Yeah. Roll of the Dice by Nottingham Forest. So
very good, very good.
A 39-word statement by Nottingham Forest. 1 word for each day of Ange's tenure. And the Athletic said that Dyche's 7 years of Premier League management was seen as key for his appointment, large in the contingent of Forest, of course. I think basically there's some similarities between Nuno and Dyche's Everton that the BBC noted. So I'm not going to go through all the stats, but there's some similarities there. But I think, Sam, basically the TLDR is everything points to sort of a no-touching policy, dealing with Europe and the league, who Dyche is going to select. And Ange barely played any of those kind of 120 million odd worth of signings. So don't know how the team's going to be, how the reunion with Chris Wood's going to go. Should be worth seeing, but ultimately something that doesn't really concern us as FPL managers for the short term, at least. So if you've got kind of, a Neko or something still hanging around, then maybe you're kind of like, well, maybe I'll hold on to them for a bit longer. But for us as non-owners of any Forest assets, it feels very much like, okay, that's cool. We'll give it to the second half of the season and then reassess, sort of thing.
Yeah, I'd largely agree with that. I think the only other thing I'd highlight on Forest's unique situation here is they're switching between systems and different styles of play very quickly here. Obviously, Nuno to Ange, back to Dyche. So a lot of fluctuation in the way they want to try and set up, and a lot of different lessons to try and be learned on the training pitch. Unfortunately, they've not got any time to actually get that training done because they're playing in Europe every week. So I would be a little bit concerned if I did still have them, even though that I would imagine Dyche is going to try and set them up in a more solid way. It's going to be tough to implement that quickly and unlearn any lessons that they have learned in the month or so that they had under Ange. And things weren't going well before that, really, anyway, truth be told. And there was a drop off at the back end of last season under Nuno. So I'd still be pretty concerned. And yeah, absolutely not touching them right now. If I've still got them, I would also be looking at selling, honestly. I just think it's way too complicated to start pinning your hopes on players at Forest for now, especially defensively, given the tight turnarounds. I just we just don't even know who's going to start necessarily in certain positions, let alone whether or not they're going to be able to shore up defensively. So I would leave them to one side for now, and we can come back to them in a little while, potentially, if we see some green shoots appearing. But honestly, there are plenty of defenders out there that are going to crop up ahead of any Nottingham Forest for quite a while now. So it's just not going to be interesting for quite a while.
Yeah,
It's whether or not we want to target them anymore.
Yeah, it's that, and also the assets that you've mentioned, that they've all dropped in price. So there could be some kind of good distressed assets when we need them going forward. But I think kind of the point that you made at the end was kind of what I was going to finish up on, was kind of whether we still kind of look at the Bournemouth game coming up, for example, because there are loads of people kind of thinking, oh, you know, could Semenyo be a good alt cap to the big robot?
Mm-hmm.
I think the answer is now no. I mean, obviously, probably wouldn't have been anyway, but in different world, but Ange was still there. I think there was definitely more of an open question about it, or more of a debate to be had, or more of a potentially a bit of a punt to be taken. Whereas now, I think you kind of err on the side of no, just see how that goes. I think that's kind of the main upshot, really. Never good to lose a team to target, but hey, there we go. I'm sure Forest fans are very happy to have 3 old boys in Dyche, Wone, and Stone back there. Right, on to the main topic this week then. The midfielders, are they still disappointing? Are they disappointing if they're not called Antoine Semenyo? Big note here, and one we'll potentially come back to next week in the same vein as this analysis. This could equally apply to strikers not called Haaland. Definitely aware of that, and I just feel like midfielders, there are a few more options to discuss for now. And I don't know. I think some potentially people could think this way. Lots of people kind of noting the chasm between Semenyo, 24-point gap between him and Caicedo, next best performing midfielder. So what's going on? So we're going to do a kind of a semi-deep and medium deep dive to find out. On YouTube, you'll see there's a chart up. I'll explain that in a minute for audio listeners, and explain that for YouTube watchers as well. And just to note as well, but there's obviously a bit of devil's avocado being played here, because straight up, before we even go into that, Sam, are they disappointing, or is it just Semenyo basically distorting things as he started like an overperforming train?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I can see where the disappointment comes from, but I think a level of framing is probably required. I would say that midfielders aren't disappointing. 3 midfielders are disappointing, and that is Salah, Palmer, and Saka so far. The fact that they haven't been hitting the heights of recent seasons is probably bringing up this question in the first place, because you add them into the mix at the top of the tables for midfielders, and Semenyo in there as well. Everyone else would probably just look like they're ticking along quite nicely at about 5 or 6 points on average. It's absolutely fine for someone like an Ndai or an Enzo, or even an Anthony as well. Jaden Anthony as well. So all of these players are ticking along quite nicely for their price points. It's just that some of the big hitters aren't quite doing so. Even throwing Bruno to that up until last week, obviously got that 6-point assist, but he'd missed 2 penalties. You add them back into the mix, and he's right up there as well. And we're not even having this discussion. So it's the big hitters for me, for different reasons. Salah's just misfiring, and he's been fit the whole time, but Palmer's been out and therefore not been able to accumulate the points. Saka's also not been fully fit and on the pitch for the entire season. So I think those factors come into it. But either way, we're looking at raw output here, and they're all not towards the top next to Semenyo. I think with those 3 or 4 added, we're not even really having this discussion. And the rest of them, the performance is kind of baked into their price points.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. And, you know, it is very early in the season as well. And to add some more context, just on top of what you just said, Sam, which is obviously very astute reasoning, I did have a look at the last sort of 2 or 3 years, just at this point, just briefly. So last year, Palmer and Salah were over the 60-point mark already. And the likes of Saka, Luis Diaz, Bumo were in the 50s. So obviously that kind of fills that gap, which is yawning between Semenyo and Caicedo. So as you said, missing assets probably is there's some culpability there in terms of what's going on here. 23-24 at this point, Salah was on 59, Son was on 54, and Saka was on 53 as the top 3. So I think this kind of underlines how good Semenyo's start has been more than anything else. And 2023, we actually saw KDB on top with 45, followed by Pascal Gross, remember him, on 42, and Marcus Rashford, who has done very well against Olympiacos tonight, on 40. And so it really veers around an awful lot. Having done that kind of surface level analysis, I don't know if you can call that analysis. Let's put some inverted commas around that and put it on the table. But yeah, it definitely veers around an awful lot. And this year, just to introduce kind of the chart that I mentioned, and this is thanks to FPL data. Definitely go and check out that website. It's very, very good. A nice way of kind of looking through all the different ways the data is represented, just a nice little resource which is out there. FPL_data on X, which shows points scored by underlying non-pen XGI data via understat. So audio descriptor for listening, it's points scored on the x-axis and non-pen XGI on the y-axis, and all midfielders are plotted, and there's a line drawn to display the average, which gives you kind of an idea of kind of how it all sort of maps out. I'll put this on socials as well. You've got, unsurprisingly, Semenyo off the chart in terms of points scored, but obviously below average on the underlying because of his overperformance. And then we've got a couple of kind of discernible clusters developing in terms of the players that we're really interested in. There's one sort of big cluster of sort of also rans at the far end, who haven't really got much underlying data, haven't really scored that many points, not really FPL relevant at all. You've got above the average line what we've called the likely lads, who are around the kind of 30 to 45 point mark at the moment, with decently high non-pen XGI numbers taken above the line of average. So players like Gakpo, you'll know why if you did watch the game against United on Sunday, why he's kind of way up there in terms of underlying data. Bumo, Minte, Salah, Enzo, Sarr, Bruno, the list goes on. And below that line of average, you've got a cluster of what's called, perhaps unfairly, perhaps not, the DEFCON plodders. And that's the likes of Casado, Rice, maybe more contentious because he does have a bit more attacking threat about him, Cullen, Polinia, Stack, Xhaka. You can kind of conceptualize who we mean here. But yeah, on a basic level, this is a medium dive, remember, based on 8 weeks of data, so any advanced stats can wait. Doing this helps us to kind of pull apart these two sort of cluster of players. To reiterate that, so it's the likely lads who are there for attacking returns and above the average versus the DEFCON plodders who are below that average. So with that in mind, let's go through some of these in detail to try to figure out what's going on in midfield at the moment, and whether anything actually is going on. So it's kind of form versus fixtures and kind of expanding that a little bit and just kind of focusing on midfield, and maybe as well, Sam, just kind of giving some idea about who's going to be breaking out this year a little bit to kind of match Big Antoine down in Bournemouth. To start with DEFCON plodders, though, I think it's fair to say these guys probably aren't going to be the guys who are going to break the mold, are they, Sam? They're more sort of fourth or fifth mid.
Exactly that. Yeah. So they are the edge pieces that I like to talk about on this podcast quite a lot. They're obviously quite well priced in most cases, around 5 to 5.5 million in, I think, almost every single example there that you mentioned. Some of them have risen. Bryce is 6.5 actually, so a little bit more. But yeah, generally very well priced. They'll get the DEFCON in about 50% of games on average, you would think. So that's an extra 38 points across the season for them on top of what they would have been last season. And then you would expect that most of them get a nominal amount of goals across the season or attacking returns across the season, but not to the level of some of them like Casado so far, who's picked up 3 in his opening 8 games, or 7.5, I suppose, considering he came on at half time in Gameweek 8. And you wouldn't expect that trend to continue. So there will be some regression to the mean with some of these overperformers. The reason that they're standing out and they're in the circle on the graphic at the moment to the far right-hand side is because their raw points are actually a lot higher than you would normally expect them to be at that price point. The reason that a lot of them are higher is because they've overperformed their XG quite considerably. As you can see, they're quite low on the non-penalty expected goal involvements, but yet the points are kind of deterministic or self-determining in that they've got the goals, therefore they're to the far right-hand side. It will balance out over the season, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to be good value picks in that 4th or 5th midfielder role to accompany some of the more expensive midfielders that are towards the north of this graphic, above the average line, the trend line that you spoke about. They are typically much more expensive midfielders that are more explosive, let's say, on a week-to-week basis, but they won't have that floor that some of the ones on the bottom half of this graphic might have of 4 or 5 points, literally just getting some DEFCON every now and then and ticking along quite nicely. So I think a mixture of both is good, but it's important not to over-exaggerate or over-rely on those DEFCON guys below to be hitting the 10, 11 pointers all that often. They're to the far right-hand side right now, but that will average out across the season in most cases. There'll be one or two outliers, but it will average out.
Yeah. I mean, I think DEFCON, that's why we call them DEFCON plodders, is key. So Xhaka and Cullen are top for DEFCON points amassed, 10 points apiece. Elliot, Casado, Elliot Anderson, that is, Casado, Garner, Florentino over at Burnley, who's amassed 58 DEFCONs in 4 games, which is pretty wild. Which is 4.5 are all kind of names you could probably mention. But I suppose kind of the only thing I'd build onto that is we haven't quite got that unicorn yet. Someone like a Rice maybe, or Paqueta, who've both got 6 DEFCONs apiece, who also have that and the attacking input. I mean, that could be something that we're really kind of looking for, someone to tie it all together. I think the best nominee for that is Chewy, FPL's man, and Dyche, with 6 DEFCONs amassed so far, while also appearing in the Likely Lads grouping. He's second, Sam, to Elliot Anderson for recoveries this year, which we said at the start of the season was really important for DEFCON for mids. He's got 53, which is 11 behind Anderson, 5 ahead of Bruno. And that's why he tends to do right in this measure. Admittedly, he's had some tough games, which are probably where that has come from. But on the other hand, Dyche's only had 7 shots this season, counting as 1 per game, basically, and that includes 6 shots on target. 3 of his big chances have been converted. 1 of them was a penalty. So yeah, probably an interesting one to kind of just throw into the mix. Overall, just plod. But if we do find one which does kind of do the holistic, does everything, the Goldilocks zone, then that could be one to really get on. And Dyche looks like kind of a likeliest runner. But I don't mind Rice. I don't mind the Paqueta. I do mind Paqueta, but I don't mind Rice as well as a nominee.
If Rice was in any other team, he'd be incredibly popular. It's the fact that he plays for Arsenal and there are just so many other good Arsenal picks that means that he's just never going to be part of the most owned players in this bracket, because he actually does tick all of these boxes. He's got plenty of attacking potential. He's on half of all of the corners and has a good delivery. And Arsenal are incredible from set pieces, but they've got other good assets in there that are probably going to just about outperform him over the season. I mean, maybe not even, but it looks likely that it's at least a conversation, and therefore he just won't get that popular. And Dyche, I was going to mention myself as well. He will consistently pick up those defensive contributions for the recoveries, as you mentioned. But also, let's not forget about Bruno, who's actually doing pretty well on the average DEFCONs per 90. It's just that he's been a bit unfortunate in a couple of games not to quite hit that threshold. So he's been close enough in a lot of them, but not, a bit like Elliot Anderson actually has been very close in almost every single game. And if you averaged it out, he'd be over that threshold every single week. But because it ebbs and flows, he's not hit it in every single week. So Bruno is good on the DEFCONs, but just hasn't quite been consistent enough week to week on them yet. But I think he will fit neatly into that Goldilocks zone every now and then. Yeah,
that's why I've got him. Anyway, let's move on to Likely Lads, because they're a lot more fun to talk about. As kind of you'd think they're the ones that kind of are more exciting. You're looking for the haul from them. Let's take the man right at the top in terms of the online numbers is Gakpo. Liverpool generally as well. So let's do Salah. They're naturally bleeding to the other. And Liverpool generally, as Jonathan Wilson wrote on Monday, aren't suddenly terrible. They're 8 league games this season. They've had lower XG against only Newcastle and Crystal Palace. And by rights, I think in that game, it's fair to say, even though I did enjoy them losing from an Arsenal perspective, I think it's fair to say they probably should have won it. Gakpo in third for XGI now, fourth for the per 90 at 0.72 per 90, which is pretty wild, but I think a lot of that is informed by this game. You know, he could have scored a hat-trick and couldn't stop bothering the woodwork, almost missed that. Is the goal he scored. I mean, it went off his heel, didn't it, into the top corner. But I do think, Sam, he's got that left wing slot for slot nailed down and stayed on when Ekitike came on. Many people were saying that he could share that, but it's worth noting he was slated to come off for Frimpong when he did score that pass from Chiesa. Good value at the price, Sam. Obviously, the next few fixtures aren't particularly enticing. As I said last week, it's kind of fortuitous that we've got a bit of time to just kind of watch and wait with Liverpool at the moment before that kind of good fixture run. Maybe game week 12 if Forest are still at 6s and 7s. Hey, I said it again, kids. Or game week 13, definitely. West Ham, Leeds, Sunderland, and Leeds.
Yeah. So Gakpo is going to be a really interesting one come game week 12. I don't feel like I've collected enough information on Liverpool to make a really solid bet on who the best option is just yet. But Gakpo is putting his hand up as the one that is most interesting right now, partly because of his price point, but also even if you take price out of consideration with all of those players, Salah included, he's been the most impressive one on the pitch. And I would probably give that title to Ekitike if he was getting the minutes, but the minutes are just not secure enough for him. So you can't really go there with any sense of security. So right now it's Gakpo that is providing us with something to think about in that Liverpool side. Obviously, a very good standout performance against Man United, in which he was quite unlucky. But even before then, he's been creeping up in the expected minutes quite quickly over the last few game weeks. It got brought off a couple of times earlier on in the season, but it does look like he's the guy that Slot is backing at left wing, and that they're not going to mess around too much with having Isak or Ekitike play out wide. It looks like he's made that position his own, or at least as far as we can tell at the moment. The only thing I would say is that when you've got a side that is that stacked in attack and hasn't found the right solution yet for that attack, that always leaves open the possibility of changes. So as good as Gakpo has been right now, I would also just be a little bit cautious not to jump on it too early, because the real time that we want a Liverpool player is probably by game week 12, if not 13, now that Dyche is at Nottingham Forest, and they might shore up defensively a little bit by the time we get to game week 12. So we have a few weeks to really figure out who the best asset is here. Right now, it looks like Gakpo. Next week, Salah scores a hat-trick and it changes yet again. So I probably wouldn't jump too early on this one. Let's collect some more information, or my plan is to collect some more information. And if Liverpool keep going a few more weeks without looking at their best, it won't take much for Slot to start thinking, well, maybe I need to start fiddling around with that left wing spot. So when teams are losing, always keep that in your mind that things might change. So that's just the one thing that is stopping me right now. But yeah, by the time we get to game week 12 or 13, I'm 100% right now keen on going for Gakpo.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's so much adjustment going on at Liverpool. I mean, Luis Diaz just mentioned in the chat. I mean, Slot put him up top last year for his kind of pressing game. Effectively, he's doing very well at Munich, actually. Diaz as well, and kind of just the entire thing of trying to, I guess, acclimatise to a whole new setup is really impacting the players. Gakpo has obviously got that sort of longevity in the team. On the other flank, Salah, it's just not happening, is it? Kind of the glaring miss. You'd put good money on him to score in the past in the United game. He's now performing pretty much perfectly, Sam, in terms of the underlying data. It's got 2.4 for XG, 1.6 for XA, and 4 goals and assists. So 0. Maybe this is an ineffable point, but that extra bit of kind of pizzazz that has kind of seen him overperform in the past seems to have kind of gone missing a bit. That extra bit, which is hard to kind of quantify, seems to be lacking in his game, just to the eye, but very, very hard to kind of quantify that. But is he value? That's going to be the question, and it won't take very much for as you said, perceptions to be completely sort of turned on their head when it comes to Salah. At the moment, it's convenient that we can kind of ignore him, but all it will take is a couple of good performances. Salah's back, and oh god, what do we do when the fixtures do swap over? He's got the most big chances of creating amongst midfielders, by the way, Salah. So he's still producing. It's just when you look at some of the numbers per 90 in terms of some of the other kind of stats. So goals and assists per 90. Halved, basically, or more than halved. Shots per 90, more than halved. Touched in the penalty area, more than halved. Successful take-ons this year, quarter of what he kind of has averaged the last kind of 4 years. So it kind of shows in the analog, and kind of shows obviously to the eye that something's just not quite going there. But as you say, that there's always going to be this well of good-natured benefit of the doubt, I suppose, for FPL managers when it comes to Salah, because it's Salah, and this is FPL. He has been the king of FPL for so many years.
Yeah, and I think you touched on the key problem with Salah right now. It's not necessarily Salah himself, it's the team that aren't necessarily finding him in the right spots. Now, that could partly be down to Salah, maybe losing a yard or not quite being in the right place at the right time. That is surely a factor. But they are trying to blend in a number of key positions in the squad. Obviously, Wirtz hasn't quite worked out just yet. They've got Isak and Ekitike playing through the centre, both like high XG hogging strikers. Gakpo is playing a more central role and getting a lot of big chances, a lot of shots away. All of that in accumulation means less chances are going to Salah, and they're also just not finding him often enough. Those penalty box touches are in large part down to the fact that you see it on a week-to-week basis now. If you watch the full 90, the amount of times that Salah's got his arms up, like screaming for the ball, and they're just not passing it to him in those areas anymore. They're just not finding him. They've got their head down, they're shooting. Ekitike did it twice in about 20 minutes against Man United. Gakpo, I can't even count the amount of times. And I'm not even necessarily suggesting that's a bad thing for Liverpool necessarily, but it is a bad thing for Salah's FPL performance if he is getting a reduced level of exposure to goal share. We suggested it at the start of the season, when you've got a lot of big strikers in there, a lot of high XG players, they are going to want to take the shots. They are going to want to take it on themselves from time to time, probably more so than we saw in recent seasons, where the team was geared around getting Salah, getting Salah as many chances as possible. So this season, I'm just not seeing that right now. And part of that is Trent going as well, by the way. Now, Frimpong's not really worked out down that side either just yet. Bradley's also not the same player Trent was. It seems that all of these things are adding up to just basically not feeding Salah the amount of chances that he probably should have been getting. And I feel like Liverpool are going to want to try to fix that, but it's whether or not they've got the players in that team anymore that are going to be selfless enough to get him the ball often enough to make him good value at that price. And I'm just not completely sure that that's the case anymore.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, lots of change there. Yeah, losing Trent has definitely kind of had more of an impact than I think most people realised. Let's leave Enzo and Kudus just because we've kind of profiled them quite a lot over the last few weeks. Move to the United picks. Principally, I think Bumo and Bruno are probably the two. Bumo 4th overall for non-pen XGI now, and Bruno's worked his way back up there as well. And Bruno, as you mentioned earlier, Sam, is in with a shout of DEFCONs a lot of the time. 1 in 3 chance of getting them, I'd say, something like that as a rough rule of thumb. But with their fixtures, they're a bit like Newcastle's. You know, there's not one game or a couple of games that you pick out and think, oh, that's a plum sort of run there. That's 19 to 21, where they have Wolves, Burnley, and Sunderland in some sort of order. But I'd say either's kind of still decent pickup, Sam, if you're interested in backing Amarin's newfound genius. Cunha's not broken his duck yet. Bruno, unsurprisingly, has the most chances created of any player. Yeah, I think I'm more than happy to kind of just leave Bruno in there. I know last week people were kind of looking at teams and going, oh, you know, I did do this, or thinking, oh, you know, I'm going to get rid of Bruno fairly soon. But as we said with Salah, it's not taking very much for somebody to go, oh yeah, well, you know, Bruno's a quality player, let's just leave him there. You know, it's interesting how that sentiment has kind of shifted very quickly.
Yeah, look, I mean, I've said it once, I'll say it again. Bruno is just a fantastic pick. He has every single route to points ticked off, and his chance creations through the roof, and he's got better players playing in front of him. He is going to score a truckload of points this season at some point or another. There's only so much he can get unlucky with penalty misses. Like, eventually, if he keeps missing them, he'll get taken off of them. And I don't think that will be the case. He's got a good penalty record, so I think he'll keep taking them. I think he'll return very nicely. And the only players that I'd even consider selling Bruno for are the likes of your Sakas, Palmers, Salahs, if he gets back to good form. I myself am without Bruno basically because I've got Saka. But I want Bruno back at some point pretty soon. So he's just a great pick. People get so annoyed by him because he plays deep or whatever. But it's not about how he looks on the pitch. It's whether or not he's got the routes to points, and he does have the route to points. Whether or not you like it is kind of irrelevant. He's gonna score a lot.
Hope so. Hope you're right. I do think Bumo is kind of looking more kind of like he's got that kind of cutting edge back for United too. Either of them is kind of a decent pick for kind of just put them in, leave them there. Shouldn't have any issues with their minutes or anything like that. It's like Cunha and maybe Mount and Sesko are all kind of the ones who are in the mix for who's going to be playing. But I think those two seem absolutely fine. Moving down the price list slightly, Sarr. a bit of a legend, just behind Minte and Enzo. Good numbers per 90, and thanks to Mateta's exploits to be discussed later, Palace are now top of the Premier League for XG by a significant margin, 2.2 expected goals. Goodish run after Arsenal, good price. One of him and Mateta, I think, is going to be most people's agendas if you didn't have them already by game week 10. Question is, which one, or is it even both? I think he's kind of one of those players who you would be looking at and thinking, if you just sustain this, there are some buts, how small Palace's squad is, etc., with Europe. But if you can sustain this, you may be thinking, well, he could be in for kind of the 180 point season, which would be very, very good at his price.
Yeah, I mean, look, the underlying data was great last season. It's great so far this season, even on limited minutes because he missed a couple of matches. He's still right up there as one of the top performers for underlying XGI per 90. He's a great pick at 6.5. The only issues are he doesn't have the other routes to points, no DEFCON, no penalties, none of that. So it is just a pure play for open play threat, but he's got a lot of that. And at 6.5, that's a reasonable price to be paying for someone without those kind of things. And then the other point, like you mentioned, is do Palace either start to rotate, bring people off early to save them? But Glasner seems pretty keen on just putting them out week in, week out, and just letting them go as long as they can. And then the final point on that is, do they then start to slow down eventually? And I think we're still early season. It's gonna be a while yet before that really comes into play. So for now, I just go with him and enjoy inevitable points coming over the next 5-6 game weeks.
Yeah. I think that he's definitely kind of a top target for me. Looking at kind of maybe moving on Rangers after this week, one of those players that I really want to get hold of. There's 2 home games in a row against they're not like amazing fixtures again, but 2 home games in a row against good opposition. To be playing at home in Brentford and Brighton, and then you've got Wolves away in game week 12 after the international break. That's perfectly fine. No issues there at all. Run to Man City in game week 16, but again, they're at home and they've got a very good record against Man City historically, so I wouldn't be worried about kind of playing a Sarr or a Mateta in that game. Minte, I think maybe you put him in the same bucket as Sarr, kind of a bit of a likely lad who could go off. Maybe underperforming his non-pen XGI, equal actually to Enzo. Just feel like, I think you said this as well the other week, he's got just that other gear to go up to in terms of the end products. From the highlights, just looked like an absolute live wire against his old club. Short-term fixtures good on the FDR. United, Leeds, and Palace next 3 until the next international break. But there's like a but. You can place against each of them, and I don't know. I'm still just not sure. It's just at a good enough price, Sam, that you can probably just chill on that and just kind of see. He's always going to be kind of gettable, isn't he? Given the fact he's kind of around the 6-ish mark.
Yeah, agreed. And a bit like Sarr, he doesn't have those other routes to points, but at 6 million, you're happy enough to let that slide. I think with him, he doesn't quite have the same XG per 90 as Sarr. So I would pay that extra 0.5 for the benefit of that extra open play goal threat. But he looks like the next player that could break out as that sort of wide forward or traditional winger in one of those sort of European challenging sides, like a Semenyo, like a Sarr, that can break that mold and apply or become good value. He's not quite done it yet, but he's right on the precipice of that. And they've got some great home fixtures coming. So not a bad player to be betting on over the next stretch all the way through Christmas. They've got some really, really lovely home fixtures in there. In fact, 5 or 6 of them are absolute bankers for goals, you would think. So yeah, as the one nailed Brighton attacker right now, it looks like if you're going to invest in Brighton whatsoever for those home fixtures, he's the guy.
Yeah, I like him. I like Sarr. They're both kind of quite good for the price. And the others, I mean, Anthony Gordon, lol, just can't stop scoring in every other competition other than the Premier League. It seems it's kind of mid-January was his last goal. Idiots like me own him. Although I did see the press point with him on his wild card, which I was quite surprised by. Gordon scored tonight, first ever Newcastle player to score in 3 consecutive Champions League appearances. This guy. Be
Penalty help.
lots of TBC about it, isn't there? And yeah, I mean, we haven't mentioned him, but Saka not there yet. Time on the in terms of kind of this circle, but he'll get there. It's just kind of time on the pitch and things like that. I can't really say more except say reiterate the point at the top. His absence, plus Palmer's and Salah's, are probably kind of what's going on. And I don't know. I think that there's definitely kind of quite a few potentials who could break through. Anyone else that I'm missing, Sam, in terms of the white space who could kind of come out of nowhere, do you think?
Not right now. I mean, Saka's still relatively low on these graphs, but only because he's not played the minutes. So I'd assume that he starts moving up quite quickly. I don't really think there are too many others that we're missing. We kind of touched on Ndai. Enzo is one that we've all kind of forgotten about because he was injured last week, but he's performing very well on the underlying data at a good price. Keep an eye on them. If he's fit for the weekend, I think he's a great buy. Reinders I've gone quite cold on. If the minutes are in question, I wouldn't be bothering. Yeah, I think we're pretty much there on it.
Yeah. So in summary, has the midfield kind of meta shifts? I don't think so. I don't think so at all. I think if we're talking about strikers, and we might do that next week, if the kind of the current run there continues, we might be kind of saying maybe there is a case to kind of just go for two strikers for the time being. When it comes to midfield, I think there are so many sort of green shoots when it comes to lots of players, and there are loads of players as well who may yet show up, who haven't shown up yet at all. So I wouldn't be looking at it and thinking, oh yeah, it's all kind of a bit of a dead zone. I don't think it is at all. It's just we've got one player like Semenyo who's just gone off like an absolute rocket to start the year, but others will catch up, and it's just maybe just a symptom of the contextual factors of the season, the lack of a Palmer, the lack of a Salah doing anything, and so a player like Saka not being around that has caused kind of this strange sort of landscape to be in existence. But really, I think if we come back to this in a few weeks, a couple months' time, I don't think anyone's going to be sat there complaining about midfielders not doing any points. There's always going to be two or three who come through. Yeah, it's not going to be like defenders last year who just kind of failed en masse, put it that way. Right.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say.
No, it's fine.
That's fine. So form versus fixtures this week, forwards and defenders edition, because we've spoken a lot about midfielders. Forwards in general, I think probably mostly, although we do have a couple of kind of fullbacks in here, wing backs, as discussed, just to kind of keep things interesting. Top one, obviously Mateta, 3.767 XG in the last game, the highest XG since Opta started recording XG data. 11 shots, could have had more. That last minute kind of miss to draw them to win the match. Analog, 28 shots, just 6 behind Haaland, 15 big chances now, just 2 behind Haaland. Higher shot on target ratio than Haaland, if anyone cares about that. 64% for JP, 56% for the big guy, and 1 XG behind Haaland. 5 goals, 7.7 XG. He's underperforming Sam, big JPM, and on penalties as well. Arsenal, obviously up next, you're not looking at it and thinking, probably not the time to be bringing him in. But after that, as I mentioned, the Brentford and Brighton games, and after the international break, they run towards as well. I like the idea of picking up either him or Sarr, and it's just kind of where the space in the front line, which probably is the abiding thing when it comes to strikers right now, because you only get 3 spaces, and yeah, we'll speak about Gyökeres in just a bit. Probably he or João Pedro, those are the ones where the space is going to be, but you just don't know the fixture's been so good for those players.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be selling either of them this week. Maybe after Sunderland's out the way for João Pedro, if he fails again, then it makes a much more easy move across to Mateta in game week 10 for Brentford, then Brighton after that. I think I could get on board with that, but right now, I think just leave it a week, honestly. Arsenal are an incredibly good defence. Yes, Palace's underlying data is brilliant, so is Mateta. And if you're a really form-led manager, I get it, fine. But Sunderland at home for Chelsea, I just wouldn't be rushing it this week. João Pedro is being rested in midweek because he's suspended. I think patience is a virtue with this one. I'd leave it 1 week. And I wouldn't be selling Gyökeres for him either at the moment with the good fixtures to come. He's a great pick, but you don't have to have every great pick immediately. You can wait until the right time. And Arsenal away, at least more often than not, will not be the right time. Obviously, some players do score against Arsenal. They won't just keep 38 clean sheets, but it's less likely than it would be against any other fixture by quite some distance. So I just leave it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I can't really see any kind of open fire anyone would have. Maybe there was definitely a lot of itchy feet, trigger fingers about Gyökeres, but he has just scored a couple of goals in Champions League, and maybe that will mean let's theory craft it even further that he doesn't get the sympathy penalty in the Premier League. Ooh, hang on a minute.
I actually agree with that. I think that will be true.
Yeah, but I think I just kind of leave that for the time being. Up next, Munoz for Palace. Are the attacking wing backs dead? Well, I mean, he's a fun one, isn't he? Top of the pen box touches Sam amongst defenders. 10 shots in the box so far, 6 chances created, which is the same number of DEFCONs he's got. And I think last year we said he was very good for tackling Munoz. And same fixture list, but I think just a really fun pick to have in your team, a bit like an Estepinian or an Alonso, just taking up those absolutely ridiculous positions. And in any game, you just kind of be thinking, even if you've got him versus Arsenal, he wouldn't. If I owned him, I wouldn't be benching him this week. Put it that way.
Yeah, I think depends who else you've got in your defense to bench, but yeah, I wouldn't be scared of playing him against Arsenal. He's just got every imaginable route to points for a defender, since the likes of Leighton Baines, I think, who probably had 1 or 2 more routes to points than he did. But yeah, I mean, he's incredible, isn't he? He's such a fun pick. He's your classic FPL defender that you'd want to own. And at 5.6 million, he's not breaking the bank to get to. He's also the reason that I don't own any other Crystal Palace player, because I figured by the time I get to game week 10 or maybe a little bit further down the line, I'm going to have a choice as to which Palace players I want to double or triple up on. And I didn't really want to commit to a Richards or a Gahey or a Lacroix, knowing that actually really the defender I wanted in that Palace back line is Munoz, who gets 90 minutes, who is far more attacking and effectively playing as a right forward at times. Yeah, he's just incredible. I'd love to have him. The only problem for me is structure. Otherwise, I'd have him immediately. But yeah, brilliant pick. I think during the season, he's going to be one of the favourites.
Yeah, I'm very interested in. I've got Tarkovsky, for example, at that price point. Still hanging around, albeit they've kind of got okay fixtures, Everton, but definitely in the frame for a potential swap to Munoz at some point. And he's also got that kind of level of fitness about him, doesn't he? That even if he's playing internationals, if he's playing midweek, playing the 90, he's still kind of fit and raring to go, and still kind of like smashing it up the wing in the 90th minute full of energy. So I've got no worries about him and the fitness. So yeah, just very interesting, exciting pick. I wouldn't say no to, that's for sure, especially with the defensive solidity at Palace too. Next up is Thiago. Hatful of chances last night, late entry here. I was just wondering if people would be interested in him. He's now the second highest scoring forward, Sam. Thiago, no, sorry, not the second, the third. About Haaland, highest scoring forward, Sam. He would be second if he'd have scored. I think he missed 2 big chances fairly early on. I watched the first half, scored his goal, and then he got one ruled out marginally for offside. But he was a handful in that first half. Coyote, by the way, caught my eye last night as well. Long throw, lots of chances created, did very well. Yeah, I think Thiago is a good option at 6.1. Liverpool at home up next. I mean, if you did need to facilitate something, yeah, you might look at Liverpool fixture and think, oh god, but actually defensively they're no great shakes. They do have Arsenal coming up in 14, but before that it's Burnley, and then they've got a very good run from kind of 15, 16 all the way to the start of the new year. So I think at 6.1, Thiago could definitely play a role in our squads. It's just a case of kind of whether you want to jump on now. I think it's more of a kind of a structure question more than anything else, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, he's that perfect third striker option. You're with the current trends in FPL, I think you do probably want Haaland with a 7.5-ish striker. So he would then come into that third spot. And the problem with that is it's quite a tricky one to maneuver. If you've got him, what are you doing with your midfield? Are you taking money out? Or where is that money coming from to upgrade from effectively a dead spot? Or are you going with a traditional 3-4-3? With maybe a more expensive third forward. So I think he's that tricky spot to accommodate for, but he's at a good price. We think he's got penalties. He's getting decent minutes and good data. The problem is for me that the fixtures aren't great as a batch. I think you can pick apart pretty much any of them individually and say, yeah, but they might not be that bad. but as a cluster, they're just not what you want to be hopping onto. Like Liverpool, yeah, in isolation, it's not a scary fixture, but it's not one of the best on the ticker. Crystal Palace away, so far this season, they've been a bit more open than we'd expect, but again, not traditionally a great fixture. Newcastle, same problem. They've got Arsenal fairly soon. I just don't think it's worth it right now. By the time we get to that good fixture on, I think you said game week 15, I'll be much more interested, and I will probably want to own him over that sort of festive period. But right now, I think he'll score the odd goal, but I'm not going to get too tempted just yet.
Fair enough. I mean, last three, I think it's one to watch, isn't it? Really, last three, he's recording next year of above 0.65 every game. So yeah, just
great player.
Just something to watch on, really. Woltemade, bought in by the most people this week, reaching 475,000 transfers in for Big Nick. 4 goals, 4 of his 11 shots in box have been a goal. 5th for shots in the box per 91 strikers, 4th for chances per 91 strikers, in the 40s for non-pen XGA. But as I said to you last week, in terms of why I thought you should just include him, Sam, why not ride the wave of form? And according to Newcastle fans, they're in one of my groups, saying he's looked really great tonight in terms of a link-up play as well. In that sort of 9-10 role, which I think he'll end up playing eventually. It just seems to be one of those players who, at the moment, obviously noted the Newcastle fixtures for the longest term are quite good. It's one of those players who just seems like, okay, if you've got a forward transfer to make, say you were kind of bored of João Pedro, which I saw there's like 330,000 people have sold already, or want to move on with Richarlison maybe. I don't see any reason at all, as I said last week, that you shouldn't kind of think, all right, I'll just go for Big Nick, who's risen 0.4 since his introduction to the league in, I think it was game week 2. No, it was a bit later than that. Actually, it was game week 3 or 4, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, he is a little bit further down in the non-penalty XGI, but he's played limited minutes as well. He's come in fairly late in the transfer window, acclimatized very quickly. He looks at home in that Newcastle shirt, and some of the goals that he's taken have been really quite impressive, which probably shouldn't be a determining factor in terms of like, oh, the quality of goal is high, therefore he's a better FPL pick. But there is a sort of level of confidence that comes from that for a striker. If you're taking good chances and finishing them well, you can tell that they're feeling it, that they're feeling confident. And he is basically that guy in the Newcastle team right now, that everything just sort of runs through him. I like the look of him a lot. He's got good fixtures over a very long period of time. And yeah, Wissa's back in training. He'll probably be pushing to start by mid-November, maybe. But can I see Woltemade dropping out? Not a chance. So I think he's a good pick. Is he a must buy? No. No non-penalty taking striker ever is a must. But I think he's good value for money at that price. And he's certainly in contention up against the likes of the other 7.5s. Well in the mix.
Yeah.
But not essential.
Yeah, no, I feel you. I feel you there. I think it's absolutely fine. Got no real worries about owning him. If you want to go there, as I said, I would have some worries though about buying Reece James, who was top scoring player last week. 150,000 people have taken the plunge thus far on old Reece. What can we say, really? Second for chance created and big chance created per 90 amongst defenders, if that counts for anybody. We know the next 4 are good games for Chelsea. It's just, unfortunately for James, you wouldn't be surprised if in the Sunderland game, after you buy a nice kind of shiny Reece James and put him in your team, 15 minutes in, off he goes injured, and you don't see him again for a few months. I mean, such as it is with Reece James, it would have been lovely to have him kind of as a fully functioning FPL asset. I think in another world, and didn't have all those injuries, we'd be looking at like a 7.0 defender at this point, given how amazing he was before kind of everything got on top of him physically. But I just can't trust Reece James ever again, unfortunately. And I respect those who are willing to roll the dice, but I don't think I ever would be, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm the same as you for a slightly different reason. I'll never say never on a player, but I think for me, it's not so much the potential of injury, because I think they've managed him pretty well recently to bring him back up to full fitness and not rush him back. And they're doing all the right things. And it seems like they're doing that with Cole Palmer now finally as well, that they're not going to just run them into the ground and risk anything too severe. However, for that exact reason, I don't think he plays 90 minutes every single match. And at 5.4 million, if he is dropping out of the side to make sure that he doesn't risk getting injured and to manage his minutes a little bit and to make sure that he's fit for some of the bigger games that they've got coming, I just think it's too much money to take that risk. And I don't think he will start every game for that reason. So yeah, there's also the chance that he gets injured, but I think it's actually more the fact that they're going to try to avoid the injury by not overplaying him, that I just think he's a non-pick.
Yeah. Good nostalgia pick, I suppose.
Oh, I love him. I hope he stays fit and I hope he's in the World Cup squad. He's brilliant.
Yeah, me too. And game week, if you still got your free hit left and for some reason you're doing it in game week 11 to load up on Chelsea and Arsenal players, then sure, put him in. But I don't think I'd ever want to properly kind of own the guy. I don't want a rental, but ownership feels a bit too far. And final one, maybe two. I think we've got time to probably talk about João Pedro as well. But you said earlier on strikers, the quality, if the quality of goals scored is high, maybe he might be a better FPL pick as a heuristic. Well, maybe this doesn't quite count as far with Gyökeres, who is quite a rustic style, shall we say. Third for shots once forward, second to Haaland for pen box touches. No one cares about that. 2.9 and non-pen XGI, so 19th overall for the big Swede. Has done a couple of goals, as mentioned, in Champions League, which would do wonders for his confidence. A lot of owners have been thinking about or have kind of jumped off as the 240,000 have sold. I think a lot of that actually may be down to Krupi actually at Bournemouth, funnily enough, because you can swap Gyökeres to Krupi, and then with that you've got the extra money to move pretty much most midfielders up to Saka if you feel like you've erred in including Gyökeres. I still kind of think, Sam, that he's going to stick around for me. Don't quote me on that because I could completely change my mind. It's just that after Palace, we do have Burnley and Sunderland in short order, and the Champions League game in between that is one of the Prague teams. I think it's Slavia Prague. I'm sorry if I got that. I'm sure I got that wrong.
Right.
I'm pretty sure it's Slavia. So I think that may well be a Marino game. So I'd be hoping that we see Gyökeres start Burnley and Sunderland. I kind of feel like, well, I'll just kind of keep him for those, see what happens, maybe get to North London Derby and Game Week 12, which is at home again, and then reassess. I still think it's definitely in him to do well. I don't think it's not. I know that he's, again, not the most elegant player in the world, but he's definitely working hard for the team, occupying defenders and things like that. It's just, he's not getting the end of stuff at the moment, be it through chance not being creative for him. Had like one shot against Fulham where I think it was just because he hadn't really had the chance to shoot, where he just kind of smashed one like Leno effectively, which just counts for a lot of his XG. I don't know. I just kind of think that there will be a haul in there somewhere over the next little while. But unlike Saka, he's not a player that if I did buy him, Saka, I just kind of I'd need a lot of kind of convincing to move him on. Maybe a bit like Bruno, whereas with Gyökeres, he's more of a disposable sort of pick. And with other players potentially coming to the fore later on, even if it's someone like a Thiago who could come in and kind of free up more cash if I wanted to go back to Salah, he kind of feels like he could do a job for me, Gyökeres, as being someone just kind of hang around for the good fixtures and then move on and be a bit of a piggy bank. That's kind of how I see him. At the moment, it could change, but at the moment, I don't really see enough in terms of him being a good sort of long-term pick in FPL. He's more of a tactical one than a strategic one, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's a fixtures play. I still think he'll come good, honestly. I think Arsenal have made a good signing there and he will eventually be a very good Premier League level striker. It's just whether or not that happens in the next few games whilst everyone still owns him, or whether it takes a little while longer to get up to speed, because it is obviously proving to be a little bit more difficult to integrate him and get the best out of him to begin with. I think we've all seen that. But I think there's a great player in there, and I think he will get there eventually. I don't think that this will be a situation where we'll never want Gyökeres. I think he'll get there. The only thing for me is how far away is Havertz? Are they going to get to a point where they are competing for minutes? And if Gyökeres is still not quite at his full best by the time Havertz gets back into the mix, Is it going to be a bit too much of a minute's risk to even consider him? Quite possibly, but in the next 3, I don't think that Havertz is back unless I have missed something there. Yeah, I think with the next 3 in mind, absolutely fine to be holding. I wouldn't be selling, and I wouldn't be doing a double swap to get to Saka. I think Saka's better, hence why I picked him on my wild card, but I don't think he's worth 2 free transfers to reverse a mistake. I think they'll run each other relatively close in terms of points, and it's probably not worth the double transfer to move it across right now.
It's one of those things, isn't it? Where you have to separate the playing ability from kind of the worth as an FPL asset a little bit, because Saka's demonstrably a better player than Gyökeres is. I think that's beyond any doubt. But in terms of
right now, he is
FPL. No, as in footballer, not asset. Yeah, he's a better.
I still think Gyökeres is going to be a class striker.
I'm saying he's a better footballer than he's better to look at. He's better to watch. He's like more skillful. Okay. He's better on the eye, more refined. Got all of these little things in terms of quality on the ball and such, as opposed to Gyökeres. And I think that can kind of impact your perception of how good Gyökeres is versus Saka in an FPL sense, which probably isn't the right way to think about it. Because I agree with you that I think there's probably every chance that they're going to match each other over the next little while. Season long, I think that Saka will beat Gyökeres. But in this short period, I'm completely fine with owning him. I'm going to be frustrated, sure, but there's jumping off point. There's a good jumping off point after game week 11 when we get into the next international break. And there's probably an argument as well to just think about triple loss on defence, really. But hey, there we go. I think before we kind of get towards the end, because there's not that much to discuss after this, let's just mention João Pedro quickly. Persisting how long for? I'd noticed as well that he was being sold quite a bit, Sam, second most to Salah actually. Back down to a starting price 7.5. Middling XG&A, behind Esteval, Willian and Enzo, of course, at Chelsea. Blistering shot at start, but definitely shot quite an interesting faux pas there, because I mean it is getting a bit annoying, isn't it, with him? But those fixtures are kind of seeing people think he's a bit of a hold, and again, it's kind of what you do with him. I think you just kind of hold on, given kind of all the buts and all the caveats that you can draw around what's been going on at Chelsea recently, and him as well as an individual.
Yeah, and we, of course, had news of Delap coming back fairly soon. Some people have divided opinions on that. Also, it's worth noting, João Pedro has 5 attacking returns in 8 game weeks. At 7.5 million, that's about slightly above average, if anything. It's just very frustrating that they've come in a cluster right at the start of the season and not been distributed evenly. I think if they were, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. It's just that in 2 of those, well, actually in all of the matches technically, but in 2 of them specifically, there were red cards early enough on that it impacted their style of football for those matches. And João Pedro was dealing with a slight injury that he was playing through before the international break. And then since the international break, we've had 1 game. He was played as a proper 9 in the first 45 minutes. Maresca said after the match that didn't work. That's why we changed it. He dropped a little bit deeper. GU came on and everyone was much happier with life. João Pedro played much better. He was quite involved and looked much more comfortable in that system. And guess what? Chelsea started blowing Nottingham Forest away. So I think they are closing in on a solution there where João Pedro could be more effective, especially now that Delap is probably not a million miles away. I think that benefits him, having that proper number 9 target man in front of him, and then he can play in those pockets of space behind the striker, as we know that he loved to do at Brighton and looked like he was loving to do in early days in the Chelsea shirt as well. That all looked very encouraging. So whether or not Delap comes back quickly enough to benefit from this little run of fixtures, I don't know. But I think until he does, GU looked lively enough to probably have that spot at times, and probably helps João Pedro to drop back in a little bit, get a bit more involved on the ball. He'll do better on the bonus points for linking up play as well. If he does get any attacking returns, a bit like Bowen, because he's involved in other ways, he will also benefit from the bonus point system. If he does get a return, I still think he's a decent hold, honestly. I think let's see Sunderland. If he's absolutely terrible against Sunderland, then maybe starts to lose faith a little bit and use game week 10 as a hopping off point and just bin the rest of the good fixtures, Wolves and Burnley, and use Mateta because he's got good fixtures anyway.
Yeah, that's kind of what I think in terms of rolling to 3-3s and then reassessing then. Goo may well end up playing tomorrow for Chelsea. I don't think that's going to be too much. Maybe this is me being fanciful. I'm not sure it's going to be too much of an issue because he's not had that much game time at all. So probably it's good for him to build that match sharpness by playing against Ajax and like to play in João Pedro's stead. So we'll need to see. But yeah, I mean, I think give him one more fixture. And then after that, you can probably just, especially if you've only since game week 1, you can probably just shake hands and think, hey, you know what? It's been fun, João, but we can move on. And for game week 12, I think it is Burnley, and then I think game week 14 they've got Leeds as well away. Maybe then you kind of look at who else is coming through there. If Enzo's of interest, if who knows, if Esteval Willian is kind of the one who looks like he could be kind of an interesting pick, then go there later on. But yeah, it's a bit ramshackle after spending £2 billion over at Chelsea, which is something I don't hate at all, to be honest. Right, okay, lots going on. Let's move on to the 1 week punt update. Yeah, good week for me. 10 from Mr. Ballard. Did have it on Mukiele, but I changed it to Ballard at the last minute, but still got 10 points out of that. Whereas you were unlucky a bit there with Joe Rodon, weren't you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just using this to have a bit of fun, and so far I'm going second every week. So yeah, Rodon 1 point off of 0.45 XGC. Little bit unfortunate, but whatever. This week, screw it, go and João Pedro and see if he can turn around his fortunes at home to Sunderland. Should be good fun.
Yep, you're picking first next week. We'll have to change it a little bit. I'm just going to get Woltemade time against Fulham, who are walking wounded, it seems, against that. Admittedly, coming up against unstoppable force does mean you have a few players bouncing off and hurting themselves, notably, of course, Mr. Anderson. But yeah, Woltemade against Fulham, I think, will be quite an obliging fixture. Hopefully, Anthony Gordon as well, Pisser himself, will get in on the points. But yeah, I think Woltemade should be quite good for returns in that game.
Hope you're right. Yeah,
indeed. Best captain this week, Haaland. Move on.
I mean, yeah, it basically is, isn't it? Against pretty much anyone right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's good and it's not. It's not good because if you are doing kind of mediocrely to poorly like I am, there's not really much scope to kind of use the most powerful chip week to week, that isn't one of the special chips, to ameliorate your position. But equally, it kind of sucks the effective ownership out of all the other players. So it means that your kind of other 10 have better scope to do something. You probably will find like a Semenyo and probably a Gabriel now are going to be kind of completely irrelevant. But that still gives you 8 players to hopefully carve out some sort of positivity from week to week. So having the EO vacuum is probably quite a good thing. But I think Erling's going to be hitting kind of 150-160% EO very, very soon, maybe if not more, and then that will be it. I think I'm kind of a bit oblivious to it because of how rubbish my rank is, but I'm sure kind of where you are, Sam, you've already kind of seen that a Haaland captaincy is kind of just a bit wallpaper right now.
Yeah, it's exactly that. We're back to premium Salah days where at my rank, I think he was like 180% this week. So yeah, very high. You get a 20% benefit off of any points he scores. So it's not nothing. And considering he's getting 13 points a week, you're getting a point or two benefit from him, which again is a few positions, but it's nothing to write home about. I just wouldn't be backing against him in the form he's in. It's 12 games in a row now he's scored after tonight. You wouldn't back against him doing that against Villa either. Is there anyone else? I mean, we've got Saka and Pedro on the graphic. I would also put Bruno and Salah in the mix with nominally good fixtures, but for Semenyo even at home to Forest.
As well, I thought,
you're just not picking any of them ahead of Haaland right now, are you? Really?
No.
Unless you really want to mix it up and just try to spike something.
Pick your battles, as they say. I think that this is a battle you don't really want to be taking part in, put it that way.
Yeah, agreed. On we go.
Yeah, okay. So our teams this week: Pretty boring. Rolling. Not very much to do here again. Arsenal likely to go 2 calendar years without scoring more than one, without conceding, I should say, more than one goal in the Premier League match soon. I think that get that double Arsenal defence over the line again against Palace. I think Palace is actually probably one of the trickier fixtures we're going to face, with Mateta doing what he's doing at the moment, and obviously Sarr providing the X factor a little bit. But then kind of Burnley and Sunderland. I mean, one of them's going to score 3. You know, the last time we did concede more than one was that mad Luton game we won 4-3. Sam, I don't know if you remember it, a couple of years ago. But yeah, that kind of double defense is probably something that we should have mentioned earlier on, and that you're going to need it at the moment just to gain anywhere for Arsenal. I mean, the only question I really have this week, is kind of whether I play Rangers or Rodon. That's how kind of dull things are, because but Rangers hasn't started tonight. They come off kind of 59 minutes over the weekend, so that is a bit of a cause for concern. Probably will give Rangers one more, and then kind of take it from there. I'm not sure that. I don't know. As you said, Leeds HCC was pretty decent, so could end up kind of playing 4 at the back and benching Rangers. I'm not sure. But I feel like any transfers this week are probably not worth it, and free transfers next week probably are going to be a lot more helpful to me than making any move this week.
I mean, it's a great side this week. The fact that you've got that benching dilemma in the first place and both options are strong is an indication that, this is a side that you can easily roll. Jealous of Bruno in there. Gordon as well, I expect to do well against Fulham. Tarko's a DEFCON monster. Lots of home games in there, only 2 away. Yeah, it just looks really, really strong. I do like Rodon this week, so if I could find a way to start him in this, I probably would. Whether or not I'd start him ahead of Reinders or Tarko, maybe, but it's just whether or not. I don't know. West Ham look really bad though, and they've got a quick turnaround. They've effectively got like a midweek game this week because they've gone Monday to Friday, so a 3-day turnaround.
Yeah,
not ideal. And Leeds at home are a different beast.
I'm tempted.
It's a tricky one. Week. I don't know who you would start him in front of. That is the problem.
I think it's just Reinders. I think that Tarko, I'm just expecting, DEFCON and decent chance for clean sheet, given that Spurs are also at 6 and 7s, at least on paper.
Yeah.
I think the review is telling me to do the 4-3-3. I haven't checked Solio, unfortunately. If Johnny's in the chat, I'm sorry. But review's also telling me to captain Fernandez for what it's worth. Review has Rodon 0.5, I think it is, above Reinders, which is kind of actually that's out of what I deem as it's up to you, and kind of saying, you should probably do that. I'm kind of in between on Reinders. I feel like he's, he does seem to kind of have 1 or 2 good moments every game, and at the price having at least the starts. But it's very worrying given the fact that he's kind of not started tonight and the early sub last week versus Rodon, who knows going to play, and as you said, Lee's different beast at home. So I mean, I could do that. I'm not really too bothered either way on which one plays. I think Reinders was kind of 33 third owned or something like that effectively, and so whether I kind of deem that as being interesting in terms of it opening up a potential sort of EO threat that I don't really need to kind of take on versus a Rodon, who I'm just hoping for a clean sheet from, maybe DEFCON, but probably just a clean sheet. Probably talking about kind of both players getting 2 points, aren't we, really?
Yeah. Oh, I've just thought of another thing with Rodon though that might swing you over the edge. Rodon has been getting pretty good chances from set pieces this season, and look who he's up against at home this week. Like, I wonder if there's a little factor there. I think I'd probably go Rodon over Reinders, but it is close. That is enough. It's close enough that it's definitely a down to gut instinct kind of call. I reading between the lines, I'd be a little bit worried about Reinders' minutes, because why are you bringing him off early and then not starting him in the Champions League? It's a little bit weird. And Pep is Pep, so I just don't know. And now Cherky's back as well. Yeah, it's just all a mess.
Plus, it gives me a reason to watch the game on Friday. You know,
yeah, there's that. Although,
Yeah.
do we want to watch a Leeds West Ham game? I don't know.
God. All the Leeds
Maybe.
fans getting Sam's DMs now. He's doing your club down.
Oh no, I'm more talking about the West Ham side of it. Honestly, I'm quite enjoying Leeds so far.
I'm very happy to see. I'm very happy to see Dominic Calvert-Lewin's brace. Yeah, that's a good likelihood. I've also just seen that Anthony Gordon has followed up his goal with an assist. So
Lovely
hey, you know what, Pisshair, you've got one more week against an obliging Fulham. I don't care. You've got West Ham in 10. You're gone if not.
You need Gordon's evil twin Voltemade. That's what you want. That's the way to go.
Where am I? If only was midfielder, Sam. If only midfielder. And what about you? I think you're kind of looking quite strong.
Yeah. I've got the wrong screenshot on. I've just realised because I have since moved Sarr to Rodon because I accidentally uploaded this one before changing it. So yeah, I'll probably be playing a 4-3-3 with Rodon in place of Sarr there. So Pope in goal, double Arsenal defence with Timber and Gabriel, Senesi alongside Rodon, and then midfield 3 of Enzo, Semenyo, Saka. I think Enzo will be fine. Obviously, we'll wait and see Champions League midweek, but the indications are it's not a big deal. And then João Pedro, Voltemade, and Haaland up top. Then it's the question of whether or not bench boost is viable. So it would be a bench of Dubravka, Sarr away at Arsenal, Longstaff at home to West Ham. So I mentioned Rodon on set piece for the set pieces against West Ham. Guess who's taking those set pieces? Longstaff is. So I quite like that. And then, yeah, I mean, there's not really any player here I actively want to bench. I even quite like Sarr this week. I know it's against Arsenal. It's not a great fixture for him, obviously, but if anyone's going to break the Arsenal clean sheet, it's going to be one of Mateta, Sarr, or Munoz, so it's a decent enough chance there. Overall, for a bench boost, I actually really like it, and I'd like to get it out of the way. It's just Anderson, and I just don't think he'll play with a hamstring problem. It looks like a minor one, a grade 1, which doesn't take long to heal up from, but my gut is telling me he's not going to play this one, and I don't want to use a transfer to get rid of him because I do want him on over the long term. And I also have the backup of bench boosting in game week 11 when I'll also have 3 free transfers if anything goes wrong then. I really want to bench boost this week because I think it will go quite well, but I can't do it with 14 players, and certainly not with any risk on Enzo as well. So unless we get some surprisingly good news on Anderson, I'll probably just play the 4-3-3, roll the transfer, and look at bench boosting in game week 11.
Anderson to Esteve loading. Yeah,
not happening.
It's just not. It's unfortunately. I think coming off after 40 minutes. I think that kind of says all it needs to say really. If he's just kind of put his hand up and been subbed off immediately. I think he was subbed off before he even got off the pitch. So, the ball went up at least before he had even left the pitch. So yeah, I don't think he's going to play this week. I hope he's back for game week 10 because he was meant to come in for me that week. I guess I can play Rodon at Brighton if needs be, but because of Senesi, I should say, actually being away against Man City and then all that sort of jazz. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that sounds about right. I would be tempted to play Sarr personally, but because of the all-in sort of thing that you've got double Arsenal defence and having 4 players in that game, and yeah, maybe
that's the problem. Yeah, I wouldn't play Sarr over Rodon. I don't think. And then it's a matter of who else.
Yeah, I think on paper the expected points have got to be quite in
Well,
they're probably going to be in Rodon's favour, aren't they? I think if Sarr wasn't penalties, and I think that then you'd kind of be playing Sarr over Rodon, but because he's not, I don't think you do.
Yeah, I suppose. I just think, without even considering that side of it, I just think West Ham at home is a pretty good fixture for a potential clean sheet, and maybe if I'm lucky, attacking returns. This is why I wanted to bench boost this week, because I knew I get to this week and I want to kind of play all of them. Like all of them have a reasonable shout of getting points, including Sarr. So yeah, it'd be a shame not to, but I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it with 14 players. And then it's a question of, is it worth any transfer to get rid of Anderson? Michael Keane, maybe double up Bournemouth with Truffert or Diakite. I can do that, but do I want double Bournemouth defence? Like, it
How
rules
much
me
is
out
that?
of Creepy Jr.
And actually, Ampong at Chelsea's 3.9. If he's likely to play,
Yeah.
you
If I
know,
think he's going to play, yeah, maybe.
that could be fun. The fun.
But I also
commas
wanted the
when it
free
doesn't-
transfers for Game Week 12 to move across to Liverpool, so I don't want to start spending loads of them now. Yeah.
It's tricky.
I don't know. I'll have a think.
Yeah. I feel like it's kind of worth using the transfer, isn't it? If you're going to bench boost, just optimize for that, because if everything else is fine, you might as well just do it.
Yeah, but not if I've got a backup in 11. I don't think.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. If you got a decent kind of fallback, then I wouldn't bother.
Yeah, it's whether or not. I mean, it's Nottingham Forest away for Leeds that week, I think, so it's not quite as nice. But Forest, yeah, under Dyche, are they going to be that attacking? Oh, I don't know. I just want a week where they're all fit, really, and I'll just play it. Forget optimizing it too much. Ideally, it was this week. If it's not, then fine. I'll just play another week.
What I would say is that if Anderson's not fit this week and he's got a hamstring injury, then I mean, you're going to have the same problem again. Game week 11. That would be the only thing that would play on my mind. But yeah, obviously you've got a little while to think about it anyway. And it's only one. It's only one. Have you got 2 frees or just one?
Just 1 free. So yeah,
Okay.
I'd ideally like to roll it. You're right on Anderson though, so I am keeping my ear to the ground on press conference news, because if it sounds like a significant one and he's going to be out for multiple weeks, then you're totally right. I should just use the transfer, get rid of him and bench boost now, because it solves 2 problems in one, rather than having an ongoing issue with Anderson. So I will have a good think about who that replacement should be. If he is indeed out for quite a while. But if it sounds like a minor one, then I'll probably just leave it and go ahead with bench boosting in Game Week 11, if possible.
Yeah, given the fact you've spent the extra on Longstaff as your kind of your 5th mid, it kind of makes sense to just look at a 4.0. So there's always going to be a Burnley defender against Wolves if you want to double up on their defense. I mean, it's not the worst game to be doing that in. But yeah, maybe actually Ampong could be the guy for you. I think Tuan Zabe as well at Burnley. Jack Turfy Topper was on Clash Correspondence. I was listening to him when I was making dinner, and he was saying that yeah, he's pretty fine as well. So yeah, there are a couple of very, 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 very cheap options you could go for this week if you want to, Sam. But yeah, keep your ear to the ground. Let's see where you go next week.
Yeah, I think so. I'll have a think, but we'll see. Anyway, right, let's wrap up the show, Tom. In record time, hour 20, not bad for us. Hopefully you've all enjoyed today's show with Champions League going on in the background. We always appreciate you tuning in live. If you did enjoy Who Got the Assist today, we'd really appreciate if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel. If you're watching along on YouTube, leaving a 5-star rating as well, whether you're listening on Spotify, iTunes, wherever. And of course, if you would like to follow us on the social channels, we are on Blue Sky at Who Got the Assist, all written out one word, or FPL Pricey for me, on X at WGTA_FPL, FPL Pricey for me on there. And of course, if you are listening in, we are on YouTube at Who Got the Assist, all written out, and I'm on there at FPL Pricey as well. If you did want to support us with doing all of those, we'd really, really appreciate it. And we'll see you this time next week, won't we, Tom?
Indeed. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Sam. Thanks for listening, watching. Hope this is you think about midfielders and FPL. Back at the usual time next week. We'll see you next Tuesday.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.